Welcome, dear listener, to another gentle journey through the shadows of history. Tonight, we step into the world of Georgian London, a city of flickering candlelight, cobblestone streets, and lives quietly shaped by a substance called laudanum. This is not a tale of grand battles or glittering courts, but of ordinary people, their daily routines, and the slow, silent pull of a medicine that promised comfort but delivered dependence. As you settle in, imagine yourself in a soft chair by a low fire, the world outside fading into a hum. Dim the lights. Perhaps let the gentle whir of a fan carry you along, and allow the rhythm of this story to guide you toward rest. Picture London in the late 1700s, its air thick with the scent of coal smoke and damp earth, its streets alive with the clatter of hooves and the murmur of voices. In homes both grand and humble, a small bottle sat on shelves, its dark glass catching the light of a single candle. This was laudanum, a tincture of opium and alcohol, sold as a cure for every ailment, sleeplessness, pain, sorrow, even the cries of infants. It was as common as tea, as trusted as a doctor's word, and yet it wove a web that trapped entire households. Tonight, we'll explore the life of a laudanum addict, not through drama or scandal, but through the quiet details of their days, their struggles, and their world. Let the rhythm of their lives carry you like a soft tide, closer to sleep. We begin with the daily routines of those who depended on this strange elixir, the way it shaped their mornings, their work, and their homes. From there, we'll wander through the lives of individuals caught in its grip, the mysteries of its hold, and the society that both praised and ignored it. Each step will be slow, deliberate, and woven with the textures of Georgian life, the creak of floorboards, the weight of a silk dress, the faint bitterness of laudanum on the tongue. So, breathe deeply, let your thoughts soften, and join me as we step into the past, where history whispers you toward rest. Let's explore the daily life of a laudanum addict. Imagine yourself waking in a Georgian home, the air cool and heavy with the scent of wax and wood smoke. The light is dim, filtered through thick curtains or a single small window. For many in London during this time, the day did not begin with the warmth of breakfast or the bustle of morning chores. Instead, it began with a quiet, almost sacred ritual, the reach for a small, dark bottle. Laudanum, that bitter blend of opium and alcohol, was the key to starting the day for those whose bodies had come to depend on it. Without it, the morning brought tremors, a racing heart, and a creeping dread that made even rising from bed feel impossible. With it, a fragile calm returned, enough to carry them through the hours ahead in a modest home, perhaps a narrow house near the Thames. A laborer might wake with aching muscles from the previous day's work. His hands, rough from lifting or hammering, would tremble as he reached for the bottle kept on a shelf beside his bed. The liquid was sharp on his tongue, mixed hastily with a sip of weak tea to dull its bite. As the laudanum took hold, the shaking eased, his breath steadied, and he could pull on his boots and step into the fog of London's streets. For him, it was not about elegance or indulgence, it was survival. The drug allowed him to push through another day of labor, to feed his family, to keep the rhythm of life moving forward. Yet each morning, the need grew stronger, the bottle emptying faster. and the calm it brought felt more like a borrowed pause than true relief in a grander home. Perhaps in a square lined with tall houses and polished door knockers, a lady of means might begin her day with the same ritual, though cloaked in refinement. Her laudanum bottle, perhaps adorned with elegant lettering, sat in a lacquered box by her bedside. She measured a few drops into a delicate glass, her hands steadying as the liquid worked its way through her. The world outside her window buzzed with the clatter of carriages, but inside, her morning was a private affair. She might sit at her dressing table, her maid arranging her hair, while the drug softened the edges of her nerves. Society expected her to be composed, to glide through drawing rooms with grace, and laudanum made that possible at least for a time. But the cost was hidden in her pale skin, her tired eyes, and the faint tremor that returned when the dose wore off. The rhythm of daily life for a laudanum addict was dictated not by the clock, but by the bottle. Mornings were fragile, each one a negotiation with a body that demanded its dose before it would function. By midday, the need might return, urging another sip to keep the shakes at bay. A worker might pause in an alley, pulling a small flask from his coat, while a lady might excuse herself to her room, claiming a moment of rest. Meals were often skipped as the drug dulled appetite, leaving plates of bread or broth untouched. The stomach, already unsettled, protested at the thought of food. And so the day moved forward on little more than the bitter liquid that promised stability. Children, too, were drawn into this rhythm, though they had no choice in the matter. In crowded homes, where the cries of infants could exhaust an entire family, mothers turned to laudanum to bring peace. A few drops on a baby's tongue, perhaps mixed with milk, would quiet the wails and bring hours of unnatural stillness. Bottles labeled as soothing syrups lined apothecary shelves, their contents no different from the laudanum sold to adults. Parents trusted these remedies, believing they were sparing their children suffering. Instead, they were weaving dependence into the earliest moments of life. A quiet chain passed from one generation to the next. The city itself seemed to hum with the presence of laudanum. Apothecaries, their windows glowing with the light of oil lamps, displayed bottles proudly, their shelves lined with dark glass that promised relief. No prescription was needed, no questions asked. A child could buy it with a few coins. A servant could fetch it for a master, and a mother could purchase it for her household without a second glance. The streets of London carried the faint, bitter scent of the drug, mingling with the smells of coal and river mud. In markets, in workshops, in parlors, the bottle was never far away, a constant companion in a world that accepted it as medicine. Yet this daily rhythm was not without its shadows. The calm brought by laudanum was fleeting, a fragile veil over a body that was already beginning to fray. The worker's hands grew weaker, his steps slower, as the drug took its toll. The lady's elegance became a mask, hiding the exhaustion that crept into her bones. Children given drops grew quiet, but their silence was not healthy, it was the stillness of sedation. The routine of dosing, sipping, and waiting shaped the hours, but it also began to unravel the very lives it was meant to sustain. Each day, the need for laudanum grew, the bottle becoming not just a tool, but the center of existence, a quiet master that dictated the rhythm of life in Georgian London. As we move forward, Imagine the faces of those caught in this cycle not as dramatic figures, but as ordinary people, their lives woven into the fabric of a city that trusted a dangerous cure. Their story continues with the individuals who carried this burden, their names forgotten, but their struggles etched into the history of the time. For now, let the image of their mornings linger, the dim light, the trembling hands, the bitter taste, and let it carry you gently toward the next part of this journey. The life of Eliza Carter, a laudanum addict. Imagine yourself standing in a narrow street in Georgian London, the air cool and damp, carrying the faint scent of coal fires and wet stone. The year is 1790, and before you is a modest house, its windows small but clean, its door painted a faded green. Inside lives Eliza Carter, a woman whose life, like so many others, has been quietly reshaped by the dark liquid in a bottle. Her story is not one of grand tragedy or public scandal, but of a slow, private descent woven into the ordinary rhythms of her days. As you listen, let the details of her world, the creak of a wooden stair, the flicker of a candle, the weight of a worn shawl carry, where history whispers softly and sleep draws near. Eliza was not born to wealth, nor to poverty, but to the fragile middle ground of a shopkeeper's family. Her father sold linens in a small shop near Covent Garden, and her mother kept the home, her hands always busy with mending or baking. As a young girl, Eliza learned to thread a needle, to count coins, and to smile politely at customers. Life was steady, if not easy, and the future seemed to promise a husband, a home, and perhaps a shop of her own. But in her early 20s, after a winter of fever left her weak and sleepless, a doctor recommended laudanum, a few drops, to calm her nerves, to ease her into rest. The bottle was small, its label neatly written, and it seemed a simple gift, a way to smooth the edges of her discomfort. Eliza trusted the doctor, as everyone did, and so began the habit that would come to define her days. At first, the laudanum was a quiet friend. A spoonful before bed brought sleep without struggle, and the mornings felt lighter, the world less sharp. Eliza could return to her tasks, helping in the shop, arranging bolts of cloth, greeting neighbors with a nod. But the relief was fleeting, and soon the bottle called, not just at night, but in the morning, then again in the afternoon. The shop's dim interior, with its smells of starch and dust, became harder to navigate without a sip to steady her hands. Customers noticed her pallor, her eyes rimmed with shadow, but they said nothing, assuming she was delicate, perhaps recovering from illness. In Georgian London, such fragility was not uncommon, and Eliza's quiet demeanor hid the growing need that ruled her. By the time she married, at 25, to a clerk named Thomas, the bottle was a constant companion. The wedding was simple, held in a small church, with the scent of old wood and wax lingering in the air. Eliza wore a borrowed dress, her hands trembling slightly as she held the ring. But the laudanum she had taken that morning kept her calm enough to smile. Thomas, a kind man with steady hands and a ledger full of numbers, did not yet know the extent of her reliance. In their new home, a rented room above a baker's shop, the smell of fresh bread mingled with the faint bitterness of laudanum. Eliza kept her bottle in a drawer, tucked among her linens, and Thomas thought it merely a medicine, a necessity for her health. But as the months passed, he began to notice the way she paused mid-sentence, her eyes drifting, or how she excused herself to rest when the day was barely half done. Motherhood came quickly, and with it, new burdens. Eliza bore a daughter, Mary, in a room lit by a single candle. The pain of childbirth, dulled by a larger dose of laudanum than she had ever taken before. The doctor, called in the early hours, nodded approvingly, assuring her it was safe. But the child was born quiet, too quiet, her cries weak and her eyes slow to open. Eliza, exhausted and trembling, nursed Mary with milk that carried traces of the drug, unknowingly passing her dependence to the infant. The household settled into a rhythm dictated by the bodily Liz's doses to face the day. A few drops from Mary to hush her cries, and the heavy silence that followed. Thomas worked longer hours, his ledger now smudged with worry, as the family's income dwindled under the cost of laudanum and Eliza's fading strength. The days blurred into a pattern of need. Eliza woke each morning with a heaviness in her chest, her hands shaking until she reached for the bottle. The liquid, bitter as burnt herbs, brought a moment of relief, a softening of the world's edges. She moved through her tasks, sweeping the floor, mending Thomas's coat, feeding Mary with a sluggishness that felt like wading through water. The room, once tidy, grew cluttered with unwashed dishes and unfolded linens as her energy drained away. Neighbors, passing by the open window, might catch the faint scent of laudanum on the air, mingled with the bread from below, but they said nothing. It was not their place to question, and besides, such bottles were in every home, as common as candles or soap. Eliza's body began to show the cost. Her skin, once soft, grew pale and clammy, her cheeks hollow despite the bread and broth Thomas brought home. Her hair, which she had once braided neatly, fell in thin strands, brushed aside with trembling hands. She ate little, her stomach rebelling against anything but the drug, and her weight slipped away until her dresses hung loosely, their seams unpicked to fit her shrinking frame. Thomas, watching her fade, spoke gently at first, urging her to eat, to rest, to see another doctor. But Eliza, caught in the cycle, could only smile weakly and promise to try, knowing that without laudanum, the shaking would return, the dread would overwhelm her, and the world would feel unbearable. The family's life grew smaller, quieter, as Eliza's dependence deepened. Thomas took on extra work. His shoulders stooped under the weight of worry and debt. Mary, now a toddler, learned to play quietly, her small hands clutching a rag doll as she watched her mother drift through the day. The home, once warmed by the chatter of a young couple, now held only the sound of creaking boards and the soft clink of a spoon against glass. Eliza's world had narrowed to the bottle, its dark contents the only thing that kept her moving, speaking, breathing. Yet each dose demanded more, and the relief it offered grew briefer, a fleeting pause in a life that felt increasingly like a shadow. As you imagine Eliza's days, let the rhythm of her story, the slow steps, the faint clatter of a bottle, the hush of a homegrown still carry you further into calm. Her life, though marked by struggle, was not one of loud despair, but of quiet endurance, a single thread in the tapestry of Georgian London. The next part of our journey will take us deeper into the mysteries of laudanum's hold, the questions that linger about its effects, and the culture that allowed it to spread so silently. For now, rest in the image of Eliza's world, the soft light of her room, and let it guide you gently toward sleep. The The hidden culture of laudanum in Georgian London. Picture yourself walking through the streets of Georgian London at dusk. The sky a soft gray, the air heavy with the scent of wood smoke and river damp. Lanterns flicker to life, casting pools of light on cobblestones, and the city hums with the quiet rhythm of evening carriages rolling, voices murmuring, the distant clink of glasses in a tavern. Amid this familiar scene, a hidden culture thrived, one woven around a small, dark bottle that sat in nearly every home. Laudanum, that bitter elixir of opium and alcohol, was not just a medicine, but a silent thread running through the fabric of society. Its presence was everywhere, yet its dangers remained a mystery, cloaked in trust and ignorance. As you listen, let the rhythm of this world, the soft shuffle of footsteps, the faint rustle of silk, the steady breath of a city at rest carry you closer to sleep. In Georgian London, laudanum was as ordinary as candlelight. Apothecary shops, their windows glowing with the warm light of oil lamps, lined the streets, their shelves crowded with bottles of dark glass, each labeled with elegant script. These shops were not hidden dens, but respected places, their counters worn smooth by the hands of customers' merchants. Mothers, even children, sent to fetch a bottle with a few coins. The air inside carried the sharp Thames of herbs and the faint sweetness of alcohol, a comforting scent that promised relief. No prescription was needed, no questions asked. A lady in a fine bonnet might buy laudanum for her nerves, a laborer for his aching back, a mother for her restless child. The ease of it all made the drug feel safe, as unremarkable as bread or ale. And yet its hold was a puzzle no one thought to unravel. This cultural acceptance was a mystery in itself, a quiet agreement that laudanum was a cure for life's burdens. Newspapers carried advertisements praising its virtues, their pages filled with promises of relief from pain, sleeplessness, or sorrow. Doctors, seen as pillars of wisdom, prescribed it freely, their words carrying the weight of authority. In drawing rooms, women spoke softly of their tonics, sharing tips on how to mix a few drops into tea, their voices low but unashamed. In taverns, men swapped stories of how a sip eased the strain of a long day, their laughter tinged with the bitter scent of the drug on their breath. Even in churches, where the air was thick with the smell of wax and old books, parishioners might carry small flasks, a discreet sip taken to steady their nerves during a sermon. The bottle was everywhere, its presence woven into the rhythm of daily life, yet its true nature remained unseen, a shadow hidden in plain sight. The mystery deepened in the silence surrounding its dangers. No one called it addiction. The word was not yet part of the language of Georgian society. Instead, those who relied on laudanum were described as delicate, their trembling hands or pale faces seen as signs of a frail constitution. Families hid bottles, not out of shame, but out of habit, tucking them into drawers or cabinets as naturally as they stored sugar or thread. When a loved one grew weaker, their steps slower, their eyes dimmer, the cause was rarely questioned. It was illness, exhaustion, or the weight of life, never the medicine trusted to ease those very burdens. This silence was not born of deceit, but of trust in doctors, in apothecaries, in the promise of relief. Imagine the soft clink of a bottle being set down, the faint sigh of a woman settling into a chair, and let the quiet of that trust lull you deeper into calm. The culture of laudanum extended beyond the home, shaping the very spaces where people gathered. In the theaters of Drury Lane, where candlelight danced on gilded walls, actors and actresses sipped laudanum to steady their nerves before stepping onto the stage. The faint bitterness lingered in the air backstage, mingling with the scent of grease paint and dusty costumes. In coffee houses, where men debated politics over steaming cups, some carried small vials, their hands steadying as they argued, unaware that the drug was dulling more than their pain. Even in the grand houses of Mayfair, where silk dresses rustled and silver gleamed, laudanum was a silent guest, its presence marked by the occasional pause as a hostess excused herself to take a sip in private. The drug crossed boundaries of class and place, uniting the city in a shared dependence that no one named. Yet within this culture lay unanswered questions, mysteries that lingered like fog over the Thames. Why did so many grow weaker the more they used it? Why did the promised relief fade, requiring more and more of the bitter liquid? Diaries from the time, their pages yellowed and fragile, hint at these puzzles. A merchant might note that his wife seemed tired beyond reason, her laudanum bottle always close at hand. A mother might write of her child's unnatural stillness, not knowing the drops she gave were the cause. Doctors, too, recorded cases of patients who seemed to fade, their symptoms worsening despite the medicine they trusted. But these observations rarely led to answers. The connection between laudanum and decline was a shadow, glimpsed but not grasped, a truth buried beneath the weight of habit and trust. The cultural embrace of laudanum was not just a matter of medicine, it was a reflection of a society that valued composure over all else. Women, especially, were expected to be calm, graceful, their emotions kept in check. Laudanum offered a way to meet those expectations, dulling the sharp edges of grief, anxiety, or pain. A lady might sit in her parlor, her needlework untouched, her eyes distant as the drug worked its way through her. Society praised her serenity, not knowing it was manufactured, a fragile mask held in place by a bottle. Men, too, used it to push through the demands of work or status, their hands steadying long enough to sign a contract or lift a hammer. The drug was a tool to maintain the appearance of order, a way to keep the rhythm of life unbroken, even as it unraveled the body and mind. As you imagine this world, let the images soften the glow of an apothecary's window, the faint clatter of a spoon against glass, the hush of a city bound by a silent agreement. The culture of laudanum was not one of loud proclamations, but of quiet habits, of bottles passed from hand to hand, of trust placed in a medicine that betrayed those who used it. The next part of our journey will take us into the lives of the elite and the ordinary, contrasting their experiences with laudanum and revealing how it shaped both the grandest homes and the humblest corners of London. For now, rest in the mystery of this hidden culture, its unanswered questions lingering like the scent of laudanum in the air, and let it guide you gently toward sleep. The elite and the ordinary, laudanum across society. Imagine yourself standing in a grand London square. The year is 1795, and the evening air carries the faint scent of lavender and polished leather from passing carriages. The houses here are tall, their windows glowing with candlelight, their doors flanked by gleaming brass knockers. Now, Picture a narrow alley just a mile away, where the air smells of damp straw and coal dust, and the homes are crowded, their windows patched with cloth. In both places, the same small bottle sits on shelves, its dark glass catching the light of a fire or a single tallow candle. Laudanum, that quiet companion, bound the elite and the ordinary in a shared dependence. Yet their experiences were as different as silk and sackcloth. As you listen, let the rhythm of their lives, the rustle of a fine dress, the creak of a worn bench, the soft clink of a spoon carry you deeper into calm, toward the gentle edge of sleep. In the grand homes of Mayfair or St. James's, laudanum was cloaked in elegance. A lady of wealth, her fingers adorned with rings, might keep her bottle in a velvet-lined box, its label etched with flourishes that made it seem a luxury rather than a necessity. She sipped it discreetly, perhaps mixed with rose water or poured from a silver spoon. The bitter taste softened by the rituals of refinement. Society expected her to be poised, her emotions restrained, her presence a vision of grace. Laudanum made this possible, dulling the nervous flutter in her chest or the ache of a sleepless night. In her drawing room, surrounded by damask curtains and the scent of beeswax, she could smile through a musicale or a tea, her guests unaware of the bottle tucked away in her boudoir. Yet the drug's hold was no less real. Her hands trembled when the dose wore off. Her eyes grew heavy, and her laughter became a fragile echo, sustained only by the next sip. For these women of the elite, laudanum was a silent ally in a world of rigid expectations. A hostess might excuse herself during a gathering, retreating to a quiet room where the air was thick with the scent of lavender and laudanum. Her maid, trained to be discreet, would fetch the bottle without a word, knowing it was as essential as the powder for her mistress's face. The drug allowed her to glide through social duties, writing letters, receiving callers, attending balls while hiding the exhaustion that crept into her bones. But the cost was subtle and relentless. Her skin, once luminous, grew pale beneath layers of rouge. Her conversation, once lively, slowed to careful phrases, as if each word required effort. Friends might whisper of her delicacy, admiring her composure, while missing the truth that her elegance was a fragile mask, held together by a liquid that demanded more of her each day across the city. In the crowded streets of Spitalfields or Southwark, laudanum was no less present, but its use was raw, unadorned by pretense. A weaver, his hands rough from the loom, might carry a small vial in his pocket, its contents bought with the last coins of his wages. His home, a single room shared with his family, smelled of damp wool and stale bread, the air heavy with the weight of survival. For him, laudanum was not about refinement, but necessity, a way to dull the ache in his shoulders, to quiet the hunger that gnawed at his stomach, to sleep despite the cries of children or the cold seeping through thin walls. He sipped it from a chipped cup, the bitterness familiar, almost comforting, as it steadied his hands for another day at the loom. His neighbors, too, knew the bottle, sharing it as they might share a crust of bread, their lives bound by the same need. The working poor used laudanum to keep moving, to endure the relentless rhythm of labor. A washerwoman, her arms red from lye, might take a few drops to push through hours of scrubbing. A street vendor, calling out in the market, might sip to silence the pain in his legs from standing all day. Their dependence was not hidden behind velvet curtains, but lived openly in the shared glances of those who understood. In cramped homes, bottles sat on rough tables, their contents measured not with silver spoons, but with trembling fingers. Children watched, learning that the bottle was part of life, as ordinary as the fire in the hearth. Yet the toll was the same as in the grand house's pale faces, thinning frames, eyes that no longer sparkled. The drug did not discriminate, carving its mark into the bodies of the poor as surely as it did the elite. The contrast between these worlds was stark, yet their shared reliance on laudanum revealed a deeper truth. The drug erased boundaries, even as society clung to them. In a grand ballroom, a lady might faint, her silk dress crumpling as her maid rushed to her side, whispering of nerves while slipping her a dose. In a dockside tavern, a laborer might slump against a wall, his hands shaking until a friend pressed a flask to his lips. Both were bound by the same need, their lives shaped by the rhythm of the bottle. Society saw the ladies' collapse as delicacy, the laborers as weakness. But the truth was simpler. Laudanum held them both, its grip indifferent to class or status. This shared dependence affected their roles in society, pulling them away from the duties that defined them. The elite woman, once a hostess or a patron of charity, might withdraw from gatherings, her invitations unanswered as she lingered in her room, the bottle her only companion. Her absence was noted, but excused as fragility, her reputation preserved by the silence of those around her. The laborer, once a steady worker, might lose his place at the workshop, his hands too unsteady, his mind too clouded to keep up. His family felt the loss most keenly, their meals growing smaller, their home colder, as the bottle claimed what little they had. In both cases, laudanum stole not just health, but purpose, unraveling the threads that tied individuals to their communities. Yet society looked away, its gaze softened by the myth of laudanum as medicine. In the elite circles, the drug was a mark of refinement, a sign of delicate sensibilities. In the working world, it was a tool for survival, a way to endure the unendurable. Both views hid the truth, allowing the bottles to multiply in drawing rooms and tenements alike. The city moved on, its streets filled with the clatter of hooves and the hum of voices, while laudanum wove its quiet chains through every level of life. As you imagine these contrasting worlds, the glow of a chandelier, the flicker of a rushlight, the shared weight of a bottlelet, a steady pulse that carries you closer to rest. The next part of our journey will return us to the daily lives of those like Eliza Carter, exploring how addiction reshaped their households, their families, and the intimate corners of their world. For now, rest in the image of London's divided yet united dependence, the faint scent of laudanum lingering in the air, and let it draw you gently toward sleep. The household unraveled, laudanum's grip on daily life. Imagine yourself seated by a small hearth in a modest London home. The year 1795, the air carrying the faint warmth of a dying fire and the lingering sweetness of fresh-baked bread from the shop below. The room is dim, lit only by a single candle, its flame casting soft shadows on walls patched with damp. This is the home of Eliza Carter, the woman we met earlier, whose life has been quietly reshaped by the dark bottle that sits on a shelf above the hearth. Laudanum, once a medicine, now rules her days, its influence seeping into every corner of her household, her family, her routines, the very rhythm of her home. As you listen, let the gentle creak of floorboards, the soft rustle of a worn curtain, and the steady hum of this story guide you deeper into calm, toward the quiet embrace of sleep. Eliza's home, once a place of order, now bears the marks of her dependence. The single room she shares with her husband, Thomas, and their daughter, Mary, is small. Its furnishings simpler: table, a few chairs, a narrow bed pushed against the wall. The air carries the faint bitterness of laudanum, mingling with the smell of bread and the musty damp of a home too close to the river. Dishes sit unwashed on the table, their edges crusted with the remnants of broth. As Eliza's strength to scrub them has faded, a basket of mending lies untouched, needles and thread tangled where she left them. The room is not neglected out of carelessness, but because Elisa's days now revolve around the bottle, each hour measured by the need for another sip to keep the shaking at bay. Mornings begin with a ritual as familiar as breathing. Eliza wakes to a heaviness in her chest, her hands trembling as she reaches for the bottle, its glass cool against her fingers. The liquid, sharp and bitter, slides down her throat, sometimes mixed with a sip of weak tea to mask its taste. As it takes hold, the trembling eases, and a fragile calm settles over her, enough to pull on her dress and pin her hair with unsteady hands. Thomas, already preparing for his day as a clerk, watches silently, his face lined with worry. He does not voice. He knows the bottle is her anchor, but also her chain, though he cannot find the words to say so. He leaves for work, the door creaking shut, and Eliza begins her day, moving through tasks with a slowness that feels like walking through fog. Now 3 years old, is a quiet child, her small frame curled in a corner with a rag doll. Laudanum has touched her life, too, given in tiny drops when she was an infant to hush her cries. Her silence now is unnatural, her eyes large and watchful, as if she senses the weight that hangs over the household. Elisa loves her daughter, but her affection comes in fleeting moments, brushing Mary's hair, humming a half-remembered lullaby, for the need for another dose pulls her away. She might sit Mary on her lap, the child's warmth a faint comfort, but her thoughts drift to the bottle, its dark promise calling louder than the needs of her family. The rhythm of motherhood, once steady, is now broken, each task interrupted by the drug's quiet demand. The household's routines have shifted to accommodate Eliza's dependence. Meals, once a time of shared warmth, are sparse and irregular. Bread and broth sit untouched as laudanum dulls Eliza's appetite and leaves her stomach uneasy. Thomas, returning home after long hours, might bring a loaf or a bit of cheese, but his efforts to coax Eliza to eat are met with weak smiles and promises to try later. The fire burns low, as neither has the energy to fetch more coal, and the room grows colder, its chill seeping into the bones of the family. Mary learns to play quietly, her small hands moving the doll in patterns that mimic the tasks her mother no longer complete: sweeping, sewing, stirring a pot that sits empty. The bottle's influence extends beyond the home, shaping how the family is seen by others. Neighbors passing by the open window catch the faint scent of laudanum and see Eliza's pale face, but they do not judge. In their own homes, Similar bottles sit on similar shelves, used for aches, for sleeplessness, for children who cry too long. A friend might stop by, her shawl wrapped tightly against the damp, and offer a kind word, perhaps sharing a sip from her own vial as they talk. The community does not speak of dependence, only of remedies. And so Eliza's struggle is absorbed into the ordinary fabric of life. Thomas, too, faces questions. At work, his employer notes his tired eyes, his distracted air, but the truth remains unspoken, buried beneath the weight of necessity and silence. The cost of laudanum is a constant strain. Each bottle, bought from the apothecary with coins that could have bought meat or coal, empties the family's purse a little more. Thomas's wages, once enough for a modest life, now stretch thin, and he takes on extra work, his ledger filled with numbers that never quite balance. Eliza, aware of the strain, feels a flicker of guilt, but it is quickly drowned by the need for another dose. The bottle is not just a medicine, but a master, dictating the rhythm of the household, pulling time and money into its orbit. The home, once a place of hope for a young couple, now feels like a shadow of itself, its warmth fading as the drug claims more of their lives. Yet there are moments of tenderness, fleeting as they are. In the evenings, when Thomas returns, he might sit by Eliza, his hand resting on hers, the calluses of his fingers rough against her skin. They speak little, but the silence holds years of shared dreams, now dimmed by the bottle's hold. Mary, climbing onto her father's lap, brings a brief smile, her small voice asking for a story. Thomas tells her of faraway places, his words slow and steady, while Eliza listens, her eyes distant but warm. These moments are fragile, like the flicker of the candle that lights the room, but they are enough to keep the family tethered, if only for a while. As you imagine this household, let the images soften the faint glow of the fire, the quiet clink of a bottle set down, the hush of a family bound by love and struggle. Eliza's life, and those of countless others, was reshaped by laudanum, its influence a quiet tide that eroded the edges of their days. The next part of our journey will bring us to a conclusion, reflecting on the legacy of laudanum in Georgian London and the lives it touched. Before leaving you with a gentle farewell to guide you into sleep. For now, rest in the rhythm of this home, its small details, a lullaby of history, and let it carry you gently toward rest. The legacy of laudanum and a gentle farewell. Picture yourself standing on a quiet London street, the year still 1795, as the city settles into night. The air is cool, carrying the faint scent of coal smoke and the distant murmur of the Thames. Above, the stars are hidden by a veil of fog, but below, the glow of lanterns spills from windows, casting soft light on cobblestones worn smooth by countless footsteps. In homes across the city, from grand squares to crowded alleys, small bottles of laudanum sit quietly, their dark contents shaping lives in ways few understood. As we draw this journey to a close, let us reflect on the legacy of laudanum in Georgian London, the lives it touched, and the world it left behind. Allow the rhythm of this reflection, the gentle hum of history, the flicker of a candle, the weight of a story now complete, to carry you toward the edge of sleep. Where the past fades into a soothing hush, laudanum's legacy in Georgian London was not one of loud proclamations or public outcry. but of quiet ripples that spread through households, families, and communities. For people like Eliza Carter, the bottle was both a lifeline and a chain, offering relief from pain or sorrow while binding them to a cycle of need. Her story, though imagined, echoes the lives of countless other merchants, mothers, laborers, and ladies who trusted the dark liquid to carry them through their days. In their homes, the scent of laudanum lingered, mingling with the smells of bread, wax, or damp wool, a constant presence that shaped their routines, their health, and their bonds with those they loved. The drug was a silent partner, always there, always demanding, yet rarely questioned in a world that saw it as medicine. This legacy stretched beyond the individual, weaving itself into the fabric of the city. Apothecaries, their shelves lined with bottles, thrived on the trust placed in their remedies, their shops a beacon for those seeking relief. Newspapers, their pages crinkled and smudged, carried advertisements that praised laudanum's virtues, promising peace to a society that valued composure above all else. Doctors, their words heavy with authority, prescribed it freely, unaware of the shadows it cast. In parlors and workshops, in churches and taverns, the bottle was a shared secret, its use so common that no one thought to call it a problem. Yet the cost was there, hidden in pale faces, trembling hands, and lives that grew smaller with each dose as the drug claimed more than it gave. The mystery of laudanum's hold lingered long after the Georgian era, its effects a puzzle that would take decades to unravel. In the 1700s, addiction was not a word nor a concept that Londoners applied to their tonics. Instead, they spoke of frailty, of delicate nerves, of bodies worn by the weight of life. The truth that laudanum was a thief, stealing strength and clarity, was glimpsed only in fragments, in diaries that noted a loved one's decline, in apothecaries' ledgers that showed the same names returning week after week. By the time the 19th century dawned, whispers of concern began to grow, as doctors and writers started to question the drug's safety. But for those in Georgian London, like Eliza and her family, the bottle remained a trusted friend, its dangers hidden in the ordinary rhythm of their days. The legacy of laudanum was not just in its use, but in what it revealed about the time. Georgian London was a city of contrasts, wealth and poverty, elegance and struggle, order and chaos, yet laudanum crossed all boundaries, uniting the elite and the ordinary in a shared dependence. It was a mirror to a society that prized control, that sought to soften life's edges with a remedy that promised more than it could deliver. For every lady who sipped it to maintain her grace, there was a laborer who used it to endure his toil. For every child quieted by its drops, there was a family stretched thin by its cost. The bottle was a constant, its dark glass reflecting the hopes and burdens of a city unaware of the price it paid. As we leave this story, imagine Eliza Carter once more, sitting by her hearth, the fire low, the room quiet, except for the soft breathing of her daughter, Mary, asleep in her lap. The bottle sits nearby, its contents nearly gone, but for now, Eliza is still, her hands steady, her heart calm. Her life, like so many others, was shaped by laudanum. Its influence, a quiet tide that carried her through days of struggle and moments of love. Her story, though small, is part of the larger tapestry of Georgian London, a city of flickering lights and hidden shadows, where history unfolded in the ordinary moments of its people. Now, dear listener, let the images of this world fade the glow of the candle, the scent of laudanum and bread, the gentle creak of a home settling into night. The story of laudanum and those it touched is complete, its rhythm now a lullaby to guide you toward rest. Close your eyes, let your breath slow, and imagine the streets of London falling silent, the city itself drifting into sleep. The past has shared its tale, and now it releases you softly into the quiet of your own dreams. Imagine yourself standing in the heart of Georgian London, the year 1795, as twilight settles over the city like a soft blanket, muting the clamor of the day. The air is cool, heavy with the scent of coal smoke, damp straw, and the faint, briny temps of the Thames winding through the streets. Lanterns flicker to life, their glow spilling onto cobblestones worn smooth by countless footsteps, while the distant clatter of carriages and the murmur of voices fade into a soothing hum. In this quiet moment, you find yourself outside an apothecary's shop, its window aglow with the warm light of oil lamps, its shelves lined with bottles of dark glass, each one holding a promise of relief. This is the world of laudanum, a tincture of opium and alcohol that wove itself into the very fabric of Georgian life. Trusted by doctors, sold by apothecaries, and cherished by families like Eliza Carter's. As you listen, let the rhythm of this world, the soft clink of glass, the rustle of a physician's coat, the gentle creak of a shop door carry you deeper into calm, toward the gentle embrace of sleep. Tonight, we explore the silent trade that made laudanum so pervasive, a trade that bound apothecaries, doctors, and households in a shared reliance on a remedy both revered and misunderstood. This is not a story of villains or heroes, but of ordinary people, shopkeepers mixing potions, physicians scribbling prescriptions, families seeking solace who moved through their days unaware of the shadows cast by the bottles they trusted. We'll wander through the apothecary's shop, the doctor's study, and the homes where laudanum shaped lives, returning to Eliza Carter to see how this trade touched her family. Each detail, the scent of herbs, the scratch of a quill, the weight of a bottle in a trembling hand will, unfolds slowly, deliberately, like a lullaby woven from the threads of history, guiding you toward rest. The apothecary shop, a haven of remedies. Step inside the apothecary shop, its wooden door creaking softly as it swings open, releasing a wave of scents that envelop you. Dried lavender, crushed rosemary, the sharp bite of alcohol, and the faint sweetness of honey. The room is small, its walls lined with shelves that groan under the weight of jars, bottles, and bundles of herbs tied with twine. A single oil lamp hangs from the ceiling, casting a golden glow over the counter, where a mortar and pestle sit, their surfaces worn smooth by years of grinding roots and powders. The apothecary, a man with ink-stained fingers and a linen apron, moves with practiced ease, measuring drops of laudanum into a bottle, his hands steady as he pours from a larger jug kept beneath the counter. The air is thick with the promise of relief, each bottle a small miracle for those who enter, their coins clinking softly as they pay for the dark liquid that will quiet their pain or soothe their nerves. In Georgian London, the apothecary's shop was a cornerstone of daily life, a place as familiar as the baker's or the blacksmith's. No street was complete without one. Its cinna-painted mortar, or a cluster of herbs swinging gently in the breeze. Customers came from every walk of life. A merchant with a headache, a mother with a colicky child, a laborer with aching joints from a day at the docks. The apothecary asked no questions, required no doctor's note. A child could hand over a few pennies and leave with a bottle, its contents as trusted as the water from a well. The shelves held laudanum in many forms, plain tinctures, syrups labeled for infants, even lozenges that dissolved on the tongue, each one carrying the same bitter promise. The scent of the drug lingered in the air, mingling with the smells of wax, camphor, and the faint must, a comforting blend that made the shop feel like a sanctuary for the apothecary. Laudanum was both a livelihood and a craft. He mixed it himself, boiling opium in alcohol over a small fire in the back room, the process filling the shop with a faint, acrid haze. His ledger, its pages yellowed and curling, recorded sales to the same names week after week. Carter among them, her purchases noted in neat script alongside those of countless others. The apothecary did not judge. He saw only customers, their faces pale or weary, their hands clutching coins or trembling with need. He might offer a kind word, perhaps suggesting a weaker dose for a child or a stronger one for a man with a cough. But he never questioned the drug's safety. To him, laudanum was a staple, as essential as the herbs he ground or the salves he stirred, its dangers hidden beneath centuries of trust in opium's power. The shop was a place of quiet ritual, its rhythm as steady as the ticking of a clock. Customers entered, their footsteps muffled on the worn floorboards, and spoke in low tones as if sharing a secret. A woman might whisper of her sleepless nights, a man of his aching back, and the apothecary would nod, reaching for a bottle with a practiced hand. The transaction was swift, the bottle wrapped in brown paper or tucked into a pocket, and the customer would leave their steps a little lighter, their burdens momentarily eased. The shop's glow spilled onto the street, a beacon for those seeking solace, its door always open, its shelves never empty. As you imagine this scene, let the soft clatter of bottles, the rustle of paper, and the apothecary's steady voice lull you, a gentle reminder of a world bound by trust in a remedy that betrayed those who used it. The doctor's study, a prescription of trust. Now picture yourself in a doctor's study, a room tucked away in a respectable house near Lincoln's Inn Fields, its walls lined with books, and the air heavy with the scent of ink, leather, and pipe smoke. The physician, a man in a powdered wig and a coat of fine wool, sits at a desk cluttered with papers, a quill scratching softly as he writes a prescription. His shelves hold jars of leeches, instruments of polished steel, and a few bottles of laudanum, their labels faded but legible. A patient sits across from him, perhaps a merchant's wife with trembling hands, or a laborer with a persistent cough, their voice low as they describe their ailments. The doctor listens, his face calm, and recommends laudanum, a few drops for nerves, a spoonful for pain, a diluted dose for a restless child. His words carry the weight of authority, and the patient nods, trusting the remedy as they trust the man who prescribes it. In Georgian London, doctors were figures of respect, their knowledge drawn from books and tradition rather than the science we know today. They saw laudanum as a marvel, a universal cure that could soothe the body and mind. Its origins stretched back centuries to the opium used by ancient healers, and its modern form dissolved in alcohol was a staple in their arsenal. They prescribed it for headaches, fevers, melancholy, even the vague, nervous complaints that plagued the elite and the ordinary alike. The doctor's study was a place of quiet assurance, its shelves lined with volumes on medicine, their pages filled with Latin terms and recipes for tinctures. The air carried the faint bitterness of laudanum, a reminder of its constant use, as bottles were handed out with the same ease as advice to rest or drink tea. For patients like Eliza Carter, the doctor's word was law. When Eliza first sought help for a fever that left her weak and sleepless, the physician she visited, a kindly man with spectacles and a gentle voice, recommended laudanum without hesitation. He wrote the prescription in neat script, the ink drying slowly as he explained how a few drops would bring rest. Eliza, clutching the paper, felt a flicker of hope, believing the bottle would restore her strength. She did not question the dose, nor the doctor's assurance that it was safe for regular use. In her world, the physician's study was a place of answers, its walls a barrier against the uncertainties of illness, the scent of parchment and wax, the soft scratch of the quill, and the doctor's calm demeanor made the remedy feel like a gift, a key to unlocking the peace she craved. Yet the doctors, like the apothecaries, were blind to laudanum's darker side. They saw its immediate effects, the calming of nerves, the easing of pain, and trusted its power without probing its cost. In their journals, some noted patients who returned again and again, their symptoms worsening despite the drug, but few connected the decline to the remedy itself. The concept of addiction was unknown, replaced by vague terms like delicacy or exhaustion. A patient like Elisa, her face pale and her hands unsteady, might be diagnosed with a weak constitution, her reliance on laudanum seen as a necessity rather than a danger. The doctor's study, with its air of authority and its shelves of trusted remedies, was a place where questions went unasked, where the bottle's hold grew stronger with each visit. As you imagine this room, let the images soften the glow of the lamp, the rustle of pages, the faint scent of laudanum lingering in the air. The doctor's study was a microcosm of Georgian society's trust in medicine, a trust that allowed laudanum to spread unchecked. Its prescriptions were written with care, but without understanding, binding patients to a cycle they could not escape. The rhythm of the quill, the steady voice of the physician, and the weight of a bottle handed over the desk carry you now, a gentle tide pulling you closer to rest. The family's burden, laudanum in the home return, now to the home of Eliza Carter, the modest room above a baker's shop, where the air carries the warmth of fresh bread and the faint bitterness of laudanum. The year is 1795, and Eliza's life has been reshaped by the bottle that sits on a shelf above the hearth, its glass worn smooth by her trembling hands. Her husband, Thomas, and their daughter, Mary, live in the shadow of her dependence, their days bound by the drug's quiet demands. This is not a home of loud despair, but of slow erosion, where love and struggle intertwine, where the bottle is both a comfort and a thief. As you settle into this scene, let the soft creak of the floorboards, the flicker of a single candle, and the hush of a family moving through their days guide you deeper into calm. toward the edge of sleep. Eliza's reliance on laudanum began innocently. A few drops prescribed for a fever that lingered after a harsh winter. The bottle was a small thing, its label neatly written, and it seemed a simple solution to her sleeplessness and weakness. At first, it was a quiet friend, bringing rest to her nights and calm to her mornings. She could help in her father's shop, arrange bolts of linen, and smile at customers, her hands steady and her mind clear. But the relief was fleeting, and soon the bottle called more often, first at night, then in the morning, then in the quiet of the afternoon, when the weight of the day felt too heavy. By the time she married Thomas, a clerk with a kind smile and a ledger full of numbers, the bottle was a constant companion tucked into a drawer among her linens, its presence as familiar as the scent of bread from below. The household's rhythm shifted to accommodate Eliza's need, her hands trembling until the liquid touched her tongue, its bitterness a sharp jolt that steadied her for the day. Thomas, rising early for his work, watched silently, his heart heavy with worry he did not voice. He saw the bottle as medicine, a necessity for her health. But he could not ignore the way her eyes grew distant, her steps slower, her laughter rarer. The room, once tidy, grew cluttered with unwashed dishes and unmended clothes as Eliza's strength faded. The air carried the faint, acrid scent of laudanum. Mary, their 3-year-old daughter, played quietly in a corner, her rag doll clutched in small hands, her silence a mirror of the stillness that laudanum brought to her mother. The drug's influence reached beyond Eliza, touching every part of the family. Thomas worked longer hours. His shoulders stooped under the weight. The cost of laudanum, though small for each bottle, added up, eating into the coins that could have bought coal or meat. He returned home to find Eliza sitting by the window, her gaze distant, a spoon resting beside a glass of watered-down laudanum. He might urge her to eat, to rest, to see another doctor, but her promises were weak, her voice soft with exhaustion. Mary, too, bore the drug's mark, having been given drops as an infant to quiet her cries. Her stillness was not health, but sedation, her eyes large and watchful as she learned to move through the world with caution, sensing the fragility of her mother's presence. Neighbors, passing by the open window, caught the scent of laudanum and saw Eliza's pale face, but they did not judge. In their own homes, similar bottles sat on similar shelves, used for aches, for sleeplessness, for children who cried too long. A friend might visit, her shawl wrapped tightly against the damp, and share a sip from her own vial. Their conversation a quiet exchange of remedies and reassurances. The community accepted laudanum as part of life, its dangers unspoken, its presence as ordinary as the fire in the hearth. Thomas, at work, faced questions about his tired eyes, his distracted air, but he kept the truth buried, speaking only of Eliza's delicate health. The family's struggle was private, absorbed into the rhythm of a city that trusted the bottle without question. The home, once a place of hope for a young couple, now felt like a shadow of itself. The fire burned low, the room grew colder, and the laughter that once filled it faded to whispers. Yet there were moments of tenderness, fleeting as the light of a candle. Thomas might sit by Eliza in the evening, his hand resting on hers, their silence a language of shared years. Mary, climbing onto her father's lap, might ask for a story, her small voice a spark in the quiet. These moments were fragile, but they held the family together, a thread of love woven through the drug's heavy veil. As you imagine this home, let the images soften the glow of the hearth, the clink of a spoon, the hush of a child's breath, and let them carry you closer to rest, the silent trade's legacy. A city bound by trust, the trade in laudanum was a silent one, its reach extending far beyond the apothecary's shop or the doctor's study into the very heart of Georgian London. It was a trade built on trust in the apothecary's skill, the doctor's wisdom, the bottle's promise. Newspapers carried advertisements for laudanum, their pages filled with glowing claims of relief from every ailment, their ink smudged by the hands of readers eager for a cure. In coffee houses, men debated its merits over steaming cups, their voices low but certain, the drug's bitterness lingering on their breath. In parlors, women shared recipes for mixing it with tea or wine, their laughter soft as they spoke of calming their nerves. Even in churches, where the air was thick with the scent of wax and old books, parishioners might carry small flasks, a discreet sip taken to steady their hands during a long sermon. This trust was the foundation of laudanum's pervasiveness, but it was also its greatest mystery. Why did no one question the drug's hold? Why did the same names appear in apothecaries' ledgers, week after week, their purchases growing larger? The answers lay in the culture of the time, a society that valued composure above all else. For women like Eliza, laudanum was a way to meet expectations, to present a calm exterior despite inner turmoil. For men like Thomas, it was a tool to endure the grind of work, to push through pain or exhaustion. For children, it was a gift from parents who believed they were sparing them suffering, unaware of the chains they forged. The bottle was a constant, its dark glass a mirror to a city that sought order in a world of chaos. Yet the trade had its shadows, glimpsed in the margins of diaries and ledgers. A merchant might note his wife's fading strength, her laudanum bottle always close at hand. A doctor might record a patient's worsening symptoms, puzzled by their decline despite the remedy. A mother might write of her child's unnatural stillness, not knowing the drops she gave were the cause. These fragments hinted at a truth no one named, that laudanum was not a cure, but a captor. Its relief, a fleeting illusion that demanded more with each dose. The city moved on, its streets filled with the clatter of hooves and the hum of voices, while the drug wove its quiet chains through every level of life. As you imagine this world, let the rhythm of the trade, the soft clink of coins, the rustle of paper, the steady pulse of a city bound by trust carry you toward sleep. The apothecary's shop, the doctor's study, and the homes, like Eliza's, were part of a larger tapestry, each thread woven with the promise of relief and the weight of dependence. The story of laudanum is not one of loud tragedy, but of quiet erosion, a slow tide that reshaped lives while the city looked away. For now, rest in the images of this silent trade, the glow of a shop window, the scratch of a quill, the faint scent of laudanum in the errand. Let them guide you gently toward dreams. The dreamlike allure, laudanum in art, literature, and society. Imagine yourself wandering through the twilight streets of Georgian London, the year 1795, as the city settles into a hush, its cobblestones gleaming faintly under the glow of lanterns. The air is cool, laced with the scent of coal smoke, damp leaves, and the distant Thames winding like a silver thread through the heart of the city. The fog clings to the buildings, softening their edges, creating a dreamlike haze that mirrors the world of those touched by laudanum. This potent elixir, a tincture of opium and alcohol, was more than a medicine in Georgian society, was a muse, a whisper in the minds of poets, a shadow in the paintings of artists, and a silent force in the lives of ordinary people like Eliza Carter. As you listen, let the rhythm of this world, the soft rustle of pages in a poet's notebook, the flicker of a candle in a garret, the gentle clink of a bottle on a bedside table carry you deeper into calm, toward the quiet embrace of sleep. Tonight, we explore the dream-like allure of laudanum, how it wove itself into the art, literature, and public imagination of Georgian London. This is not a tale of loud revelations or dramatic upheavals, but of subtle influences, the way a bottle shaped a poet's verse, a painter's brush, or a family's quiet evenings. We'll wander through the candlelit rooms of writers, the studios of artists, and the homes where laudanum's presence was both celebrated and concealed. Eliza Carter's story will guide us, her life a mirror to the countless others who lived under the drug's spell. Each detail, the scent of ink, the weight of a quill, the bitter taste of laudanum on the tongue will unfold slowly, like a lullaby woven from the threads of history, guiding you gently toward rest. The poet's vision, laudanum in literature, step into a small garret above a London street, its single window streaked with rain, the air heavy with the scent of ink, wax, and the faint bitterness of laudanum. A poet sits at a narrow desk, his quill scratching softly against paper, the candle beside him casting shadows that dance like specters on the walls. In Georgian London, laudanum was a companion to many writers, its effects unlocking a dreamlike state that blurred the line between reality and imagination. The drug, taken in small doses, brought a sense of euphoria, a softening of the world's edges that inspired verses filled with vivid imagery and haunting melancholy. For these poets, the bottle was a key to a hidden realm, a muse that whispered of beauty and sorrow in equal measure. In the late 18th century, laudanum's influence was subtle but profound. Writers like Samuel Taylor Coleridge, though his fame would come later, were already experimenting with opium-based remedies, their minds drifting into visions that would shape works like Kubla Khan in Georgian London. Lesser-known poets, their names now faded, filled chapbooks with verses that echoed the drug's effects dreams of misty landscapes, rivers that flowed like time, and hearts heavy with unspoken grief. These works, sold in bookshops or hawked on street corners, carried the scent of laudanum in their lines, their words a reflection of the bottle's promise and its price. The poet in the garret might pause, his hand trembling as he reached for the bottle, a few drops mixed with wine to steady his thoughts. The liquid was bitter, but it brought clarity, or so he believed, as his quill moved again, tracing lines that seemed to come from another world. For these writers, laudanum was not just a medicine, but a portal, a way to escape the clamor of London's streets and delve into the quiet of their own minds. The garret, with its creaking floorboards and drafty corners, was a sanctuary where the drug's effects could unfold. The air carried the faint, acrid scent of opium, mingling with the smell of damp paper and burning tallow. The poet's eyes, rimmed with shadow, might drift to the window, where the city's fog blurred the lights below, mirroring the haze in his thoughts. His verses spoke of beauty, but also of loss, of time slipping away, of dreams that faded with the dawn. The bottle, always close at hand, was both his inspiration and his captor, its contents shaping the rhythm of his days as surely as it shaped his words. Yet the poet's reliance was rarely spoken of, even among friends. In coffee houses where writers gathered to share their work, the conversation might turn to laudanum, but only in whispers, as a remedy for sleeplessness, a tonic for creativity. The drug's darker side, the way it dulled the mind over time, was a shadow no one named. The poet might return to his garret, his pockets empty, but his bottle full, and write until the candle burned low, his words a fragile bridge between the world he lived in and the one he dreamed. As you imagine this scene, let the soft scratch of the quill, the flicker of the flame, and the poet's quiet breath lull you, a gentle reminder of a world where laudanum was both muse and master. The painter's brush, laudanum in art now. Picture yourself in an artist's studio, its windows draped with heavy cloth to control the light, the air thick with the smell of turpentine, linseed oil, and the faint bitterness of laudanum. Canvases lean against the walls, their surfaces alive with half-finished scenes portraits of pale ladies, landscapes shrouded in mist, or mythological figures draped in shadow. The painter, his hands stained with pigment, works at an easel, his brush moving slowly, as if guided by a dream. In Georgian London, laudanum was a silent partner to many artists, its effects softening the harsh lines of reality, allowing them to see the world through a veil of heightened color and emotion. The bottle, tucked among jars of paint, was a tool as essential as the brush itself, its contents unlocking visions that spilled onto the canvas. The art, though not yet the Romantic era, carried traces of laudanum's influence. Paintings from the late 18th century often had a dreamlike quality, their colors soft and their edges blurred, as if the artist had seen the world through a fog. Portraits of women, their skin pale and their eyes distant, hinted at the drug's presence, their serene expressions, a mask for the trembling hands or racing hearts hidden beneath. Landscapes, with their misty horizons and shadowed valleys, echoed the visions that laudanum brought to those who used it. The studio, with its cluttered tables and flickering candles, was a place where the drug's effects could unfold. The air heavy with the scent of paint and opium, the silence broken only by the soft scrape of the brush. For the painter, laudanum was a way to quiet the doubts that plagued his work. A few drops, mixed with water or taken straight from the bottle, could steady his hand, deepen his focus, or unlock a burst of creativity that felt like divine inspiration. But the price was subtle and cumulative. His eyes grew tired, his movements sluggish, and his paintings, the studio, once a place of vibrant energy, became a refuge where the bottle was always within reach, its dark glass catching the light of a candle as the artist worked into the night. His patrons, admiring the ethereal quality of his work, never questioned the source of his inspiration, seeing only the beauty and not the cost. Let the images soften the glow of the candle, the scent of paint. The artist's world was one of beauty and struggle, shaped by a drug that offered visions but demanded devotion. His paintings, hung in grand houses or modest shops, were a testament to laudanum's allure, their colors, a silent song of the dreams it inspired. Let this scene carry you, a gentle tide, pulling you closer to rest, as we turn to the broader society that embraced the drug without seeing its shadows. The public's perception, a trusted remedy step, now into the streets of London, where the air is alive with the sounds of life vendors calling out their wares, horses clopping on cobblestones, and the low hum of conversation in markets and taverns. Laudanum was not just a private habit, but a public presence. Its bottles sold openly, its virtues praised in newspapers and whispered in drawing rooms. To the people of Georgian London, it was a trusted remedy, a gift from science and tradition that could ease the burdens of daily life. Mothers gave it to children, workers carried it in their pockets, and ladies sipped it to maintain their composure. The drug was as ordinary as tea or bread, its bitter taste a familiar part of the city's rhythm. Newspapers, their pages crinkled and smudged, carried advertisements for laudanum, promising relief from every ailment, headaches, melancholy. Even the vague, nervous complaints that plagued both the elite. These ads, printed in neat columns, spoke of soothing syrups and restorative tinctures, their words as comforting as the drug itself. In taverns, men shared flasks of laudanum-laced ale, their laughter tinged with the drug's bitterness, their stories of its effects blending with tales of work or love. In parlors, women exchanged recipes for mixing it with wine or sugar, their voices low as they spoke of calming their nerves or quieting a restless child. The air in these spaces carried the faint scent of the drug, a reminder of its constant presence in a city that trusted it without question. For families like Eliza Carter's, laudanum was a household staple, its bottle as familiar as the kettle on the hearth. Eliza, now reliant on the drug, kept it in a drawer, its glass worn smooth by her frequent touch. Her husband, Thomas, saw it as a necessity, a way to ease her frailty, though he worried about the coins it cost and the paleness of her face. Their daughter, Mary, grew up in a home where the bottle was part of life, its drops given to quiet her cries as an infant, its presence shaping the silence of their evenings. Neighbors passing by the open window might smell the laudanum and nod in understanding, their own homes holding similar bottles. The drug was not a secret, but a shared habit, its use woven into the fabric of community life. Yet beneath this trust lay a growing unease, a whisper of concern that went unheard by most. In diaries and letters, some wrote of loved ones who faded despite the drug, their strength sapped, their eyes dim. A merchant might note his wife's trembling hands, a mother her child's unnatural stillness. But these observations were scattered, unconnected, lost in a society that saw laudanum as a cure. The public's perception was one of faith, a belief that the bottle could fix what was broken, even as it broke those who used it. As you imagine these streets, let the hum of voices, the clatter of coins, and the faint scent of laudanum carry you, a soothing rhythm that guides you toward sleep. Eliza's reflection, a life in the bottle's shadow return, now to Eliza Carter's home, the small room above the baker's shop, where the air carries the warmth of bread and the faint bitterness of laudanum. The year is 1795, and Eliza's life has been reshaped by the bottle that sits on a shelf, its contents dictating her days. She is not a poet or an artist, but an ordinary woman. Her story, a mirror to the countless others who lived under laudanum's spell. Her mornings begin with a trembling hand, reaching for the bottle. Its liquid, a sharp jolt that steadies her for the day. Her evenings are quiet, her energy spent as she sits by the hearth, her daughter, Mary, playing silently at her feet. The drug has become her anchor, but also her chain, its presence a constant in a life that feels increasingly like a dream. Eliza's reliance began with a doctor's prescription, a few drops to ease a fever's aftermath, but it grew into a need she could not escape. The bottle was her companion through marriage, motherhood, and the daily tasks of a shopkeeper's daughter. But it also stole her strength, her appetite, her laughter. Thomas, her husband, watches with growing worry, his ledger smudged with the weight of their dwindling coins and her fading health. Mary, now 3, moves through the world with a quiet caution, her rag doll a silent friend in a home shaped by the bottle's rhythm. The air carries the scent of laudanum, mingling with the warmth of the fire and the musty damp of a room too close to the river. A reminder of the drug's hold, yet Eliza's story is not one of despair, but of endurance, a quiet struggle shared by many. She still brushes Mary's hair, her hands unsteady but gentle, and hums half-remembered lullabies as the candle burns low. Thomas still sits by her in the evenings, his hand resting on hers, their silence a language of love and loss. The bottle has reshaped their home, but it has not erased the bonds that hold them together. Eliza's life, like the verses of a poet or the strokes of a painter's brush, is a reflection of laudanum's allure and its cost, a single thread in the tapestry of a city bound by a silent remedy. As you imagine Eliza's world, let the images soften the glow of the hearth, the clink of a spoon, the hush of a family moving through their days. Her story, and the broader story of laudanum in Georgian London, is one of beauty and struggle, of trust and betrayal, of dreams that faded with each dose. The drug's allure touched poets, artists, and ordinary souls, its presence a constant in a city that saw it as a cure. For now, rest in this reflection, the rhythm of history, a gentle lullaby, carrying you closer to the edge of sleep. Asterisk, the apothecary's ledger, patterns in the shadows. Step into an apothecary's shop, its wooden door creaking softly as it opens, releasing a wave of scents that envelop you-dried herbs, sharp alcohol, and the faint sweetness of honey. The room is dim, lit by a single oil lamp that casts a warm glow over shelves lined with jars, bottles, and bundles of roots tied with twine. The apothecary, his apron stained with years of mixing remedies, stands behind a counter, his hands moving with practiced ease as he measures drops of laudanum into a small bottle. His ledger, its pages yellowed and curling, lies open, filled with neat rows of names and purchases. Among them is Eliza Carter, her name appearing week after week, the quantities of laudanum growing larger, the intervals shorter. As you imagine this scene, let the soft scratch of the apothecary's quill, the clink of glass, and the steady rhythm of his work lull you, a gentle reminder of a world beginning to glimpse its own shadows in Georgian London. Apothecaries were the gatekeepers of medicine, their shops a haven for those seeking relief. Laudanum was their most trusted remedy, sold without question to anyone with coins, a merchant with a headache, a mother with a restless child, a laborer with aching joints. The air in the shop carried the acrid scent of opium, mingling with the smells of lavender, camphor, and wax, a comforting blend that promised solace. Yet, in the quiet moments, when the shop was empty and the apothecary tallied his sales, patterns began to emerge. The same names returned, their purchases frequent, their faces paler with each visit. A woman like Eliza, once buying a small bottle every month, now appeared weekly, her hands trembling as she handed over her coins. The apothecary noted the change, but did not question it. His role was to provide, not to probe, and laudanum was as trusted as the herbs he ground. These ledgers, filled with ink and numbers, were among the first whispers of warning. An apothecary might notice that a customer's health seemed to fade, their eyes duller, their steps slower, despite the drug they relied on. He might hear stories: child too quiet, a worker unable to rise for his shift, a lady whose elegance masked a growing fragility. These observations were scattered, unconnected, but they lingered in the back of his mind as he mixed another batch of laudanum over a small fire in the shop's back room. The process was familiar, the opium dissolving in alcohol, the air thick with its bitter haze. Yet the apothecary began to wonder, if only faintly, whether the remedy was as safe as he had believed. His ledger, a silent witness, recorded the truth that laudanum was not just a cure, but a chain, binding customers to a cycle they could not escape. The shop itself remained a place of trust, its shelves a mosaic of bottles that gleamed in the lamplight. Customers entered with weary faces, their voices low as they spoke of aches or sleepless nights, and left with a bottle wrapped in brown paper, their steps a little lighter. The apothecary, his hands steady but his thoughts less certain, continued his work, the rhythm of measuring, pouring, and writing as steady as a heartbeat. Yet the whispers grew, faint but persistent, in the pages of his ledger and the faces of those who returned too often. As you imagine this shop, let the glow of the lamp, the rustle of paper, and the soft clatter of bottles guide you, a soothing tide pulling you closer to rest. Now picture yourself in a physician's study, tucked away in a respectable house near Lincoln's Inn Fields, its walls lined with books, and the air heavy with the scent of ink, leather, and the faint smoke of a pipe. The doctor, a man in a powdered wig and a coat of fine wool, sits at a desk cluttered with papers, his quill scratching softly as he records a patient's symptoms. A bottle of laudanum sits among his tools, its label faded but legible, a constant in his practice. A patient, perhaps a merchant's wife, like Eliza Carter, sits across from him, her hands trembling as she describes her sleeplessness, her nerves, her fading strength. The doctor listens, his face calm, and prescribes a few more drops of laudanum, his words carrying the weight of authority. Yet, in his notes, a hint of doubt begins to form, a question that lingers like the scent of wax in the room. In Georgian London, doctors were pillars of trust, their knowledge drawn from centuries of tradition and the pages of Latin texts. Laudanum was their go-to remedy, prescribed for everything from fevers to melancholy, its effects immediate and undeniable. A few drops could calm a racing heart, ease a persistent cough, or bring sleep to a restless mind. The doctor's study, with its shelves of books and jars of leeches, was a place of answers, its air thick with the promise of healing. Yet, by the late 18th century, Some physicians began to notice troubling signs. Patients returned, their symptoms worse despite the drug, their faces paler, their hands unsteady. A woman like Eliza, once treated for a fever, now needed larger doses, her health slipping away even as she followed the doctor's advice. These observations were recorded in journals, their pages filled with careful script and Latin terms. A doctor might note that a patient's nervous complaints persisted, their constitution weakened, their appetite gone. He might puzzle over a child given laudanum for teething who grew too quiet, or a laborer whose strength faded despite the remedy. The concept of addiction was unknown, the term not yet coined, but the patterns were there, faint but persistent. Some doctors began to experiment, reducing doses or suggesting alternatives, herbal teas, rest or bleeding, but laudanum's hold was strong, and patients resisted change, their bodies craving the bottle's bitter relief. The physician's doubt was a whisper, drowned by the weight of tradition and the trust placed in opium's power. For Eliza, the doctor's study was a place of hope, its walls a barrier against the uncertainties of her health. She visited often, her shawl wrapped tightly against the chill, her voice soft as she described the tremors that came when the laudanum wore off. The doctor, kind but puzzled, increased her dose, believing it would restore her strength. His notes, written in the quiet of his study, might mention her pallor, her thin frame, but he did not connect her decline to the bottle he prescribed. The air carried the faint scent of laudanum, mingling with the smells of parchment and wax, a reminder of its constant presence. As you imagine this room, let the scratch of the quill, the glow of the lamp, and the doctor's steady voice lull you, a gentle rhythm guiding you toward sleep. The family's struggle, breaking the bottle's hold, return now to Eliza, Carter's home, a small room above a baker's shop, where the air carries the warmth of fresh bread and the faint bitterness of laudanum. The year is 1795, and Eliza's life revolves around the bottle on the shelf, its glass worn smooth by her trembling hands. Her husband, Thomas, and their daughter, Mary, live in the shadow of her dependence, their days shaped by the drug's quiet demands. The room is dim, lit by a single candle, its flame casting shadows on walls patched with damp. Dishes sit unwashed, clothes unmended, as Eliza's strength fades, her world narrowing to the rhythm of the bottle. As you settle into this scene, let the soft creak of the floorboards, the flicker of the candle, and the hush of a family moving through their struggles carry you closer to rest. Eliza's reliance began with a doctor's prescription, a few drops to ease a fever's aftermath, but it grew into a need she could not escape. Each morning, she wakes to a heaviness in her chest, her hands shaking until the liquid touches her tongue, its bitterness a sharp jolt that steadies her for the day. Thomas, rising early for his work as a clerk, watches with growing worry, his heart heavy with the sight of her pale face and distant eyes. He knows the bottle is her anchor, but also her chain, its cost eating into their meager savings. Mary, now 3, plays quietly in a corner, her rag doll clutched in small hands, her silence a mirror of the stillness laudanum brings to her mother. The air carries the scent of the drug, mingling with the warmth of the hearth and the musty damp of a home too close to the river. The family's struggle is not loud, but quiet, a slow unraveling of the life they once dreamed of. Thomas tries to help, urging Eliza to eat, to rest, to see another doctor. But her promises are weak, her voice soft with exhaustion. He brings home broth or bread, but the plates sit untouched as laudanum dulls her appetite. The cost of the bottle, though small for each purchase, adds up, forcing Thomas to work longer hours, his ledger smudged with worry and debt. Neighbors, sensing the change, offer kind words or share their own bottles, unaware that their remedies deepen the cycle. The community does not speak of dependence, only of health, and so Eliza's struggle is absorbed into the ordinary fabric of life. Yet there are moments when Eliza glimpses the truth, faint but piercing, in the quiet of the evening, as she sits by the hearth with Mary asleep in her lap. She might notice the bottle's dwindling contents and feel a flicker of fear. The thought of stopping, of facing the tremors, the dread, the sleepless nights is overwhelming. But the sight of Mary's small face, so still, stirs a resolve she cannot sustain. Thomas, too, begins to question the drug, hearing whispers of others who faded under its influence. He might suggest cutting back, diluting the dose with water, but Eliza's body resists, craving the bottle's bitter relief. The family's efforts to break free are fragile, like the candlelight that flickers in their room, easily extinguished by the weight of habit. As you imagine this home, let the images soften the glow of the fire, the clink of a spoon, the hush of a child's breath. Eliza's struggle, like that of countless others, was a quiet battle fought in the shadows of a city that trusted laudanum without question. The whispers of warning, though faint, were beginning to grow, a sign that the drug's hold was not unbreakable. Let this scene carry you, a gentle tide, pulling you closer to rest. As we reflect on the broader impact of these early doubts, the slow shift, a society on the brink, the whispers of warning were scattered, like leaves carried on the wind, but they marked the beginning of a slow shift in Georgian London. In apothecary shops, ledgers told a story of dependence, their pages a silent record of customers who returned too often. In doctors' studies, journals hinted at questions, their authors puzzled by patients who faded despite their remedies. In homes like Eliza's, families began to sense the bottle's cost, their lives reshaped by a drug they could not escape. These observations were not loud enough to change the city's rhythm, but they were there, faint but persistent. Like the first drops of rain before a storm, by the late 18th century, a few voices began to speak more clearly. Medical texts, their pages heavy with Latin and ink, started to note the dangers of opium, though they stopped short of condemning laudanum outright. A doctor might write of excessive use leading to debility, a cautious phrase that hid the truth. Apothecaries, seeing the same faces week after week, might experiment with weaker doses, diluting the drug with water or herbs, but their customers demanded the familiar bitterness. Families, too, began to share stories of a sister who grew frail, a child who slept too long, a husband who could not rise for work. These stories, told in parlors or over market stalls, were the first cracks in the trust that had sustained laudanum's reign. The city itself seemed to hum with these whispers, its streets filled with the clatter of hooves and the murmur of voices. Yet unaware of the change stirring beneath, laudanum remained a staple, its bottles lining shelves in every home, its advertisements filling newspapers, its scent lingering in the air. But the seeds of doubt had been planted, and in the decades to come, they would grow into louder calls for caution. For now, the awakening was slow, a quiet shift in a society bound by tradition and trust. As you imagine this world, let the rhythm of the city, the glow of lanterns, the rustle of pages, the faint scent of laudanum carry you, a soothing pulse guiding you toward sleep. The story of laudanum's dangers is not one of sudden clarity, but of gradual realization, a truth glimpsed in the margins of ledgers, journals, and lives. For people like Eliza, the bottle remained a constant, its hold both comfort and captor. Yet the whispers of warning, though faint, were a sign that change was possible, that the city might one day see the drug for what it was. For now, rest in the images of this slow awakening, the flicker of a candle, the scratch of a quill, the hush of a family bound by love and struggle, and let them guide you gently toward dreams. Picture yourself in an apothecary's shop, its shelves crowded with jars of herbs, bottles of tinctures, and bundles of roots tied with twine. The air is thick with the scent of lavender, camphor, and the faint bitterness of laudanum. But there is a new note, a hint of chamomile, perhaps, or the earthy smell of valerian root. The apothecary, his hands stained with years of mixing remedies, experiments with new blends, diluting laudanum with water or mixing it with herbs to lessen its strength. He has seen the patterns in his ledger, the customers who return too often, their faces paler with each visit. His shop, once a place of unquestioned trust, is now a space of quiet innovation, a flicker of hope in a city bound by dependence. By the late 18th century, some apothecaries and doctors began to seek alternatives to laudanum, driven by the faint whispers of concern that stirred in their minds. Herbal teas made from chamomile, valerian, or hops were offered to calm nerves or aid sleep, their flavors softer than the drug's bitter bite. Warm compresses, baths, or simple rest were suggested, though patients often resisted, their bodies craving the familiar relief of laudanum. In doctor studies, new remedies were tested: tinctures of willow bark for pain, infusions of mint for digestion, but these lacked the immediate power of opium, and their adoption was slow. The air in these spaces carried the scent of experimentation, a mix of herbs and hope, as healers sought to loosen the bottle's grip. For families like Eliza's, the search for alternatives was a personal struggle. Thomas, desperate to help his wife, might visit the apothecary, asking for something gentler, something that would not steal her strength. The apothecary might offer a tea of chamomile or lavender, its scent warm and soothing, but Eliza's body, accustomed to laudanum, rejected the change, her tremors returning with a vengeance. Thomas might try to dilute her dose, mixing it with water, but the effort was fleeting, the bottle's call too strong. In their home, the air carried the faint hope of these attempts, mingling with the bitterness of laudanum and the warmth of bread from below. The family's resilience was not in grand gestures, but in small acts. Thomas's quiet encouragement, Eliza's fleeting resolve, Mary's gentle presence as she played by the hearth. The search for alternatives was a slow process, hampered by a society that trusted laudanum above all else. Newspapers still carried advertisements for the drug, their pages filled with promises of relief, while doctors and apothecaries hesitated to challenge a remedy so deeply ingrained. Yet the flicker of hope was there, in the herbs on the apothecary's shelf. the notes in a doctor's journal, the moments when a family dared to dream of a life without the bottle. As you imagine this world, let the scent of chamomile, the glow of a lamp, and the soft clatter of bottles guide you. A gentle rhythm carrying you toward sleep, the lasting toll, a legacy of endurance. The toll of laudanum was not just in the moment, but in the lasting marks it left on lives and communities. For Eliza, the drug stole her strength, her clarity, and the vibrant life she once imagined. Yet it could not erase her love for Thomas and Mary. Her days, though shadowed by the bottle, were filled with small acts of endurance, brushing Mary's hair, humming a lullaby, holding Thomas's hand in the quiet of the evening. These moments, fragile as the candlelight in their room, were a testament to her resilience, a light that flickered even in the drug's shadow across London. Countless others bore the same toll, their lives reshaped by a remedy they trusted. The weaver, the washerwoman, the merchant's wife, all carried the weight of laudanum. Their bodies weakened, their minds clouded, yet they moved forward, driven by the needs of their families, their work, their dreams. The city itself bore the marks of this dependence. Its streets filled with faces paler than they should have been, its homes quieter than they once were. Yet the legacy of laudanum was not just one of loss, but of endurance, of communities that held together despite the drug's hold, of families like Eliza's that found ways to love through the struggle. As you imagine this world, let the images soften the glow of a hearth, the clink of a spoon, the hush of a city bound by both dependence and resilience. The toll of laudanum was heavy, but it was met with quiet strength, a testament to the human spirit in a time of unseen danger. For now, rest in these images, the rhythm of history, a gentle lullaby, carrying you closer to the edge of sleep. Asterisk, step into a physician's study, tucked away in a respectable house near Lincoln's Inn Fields, its walls lined with shelves of leather-bound books, and the air heavy with the scent of ink, wax, and the faint smoke of a pipe. The doctor, a man in a powdered wig and a coat of fine wool, sits at a desk cluttered with papers, his quill scratching softly as he records observations from his latest patient. A bottle of laudanum sits among his tools, its label faded but legible, a staple of his practice for years. Yet, in the quiet of his study, as the candlelight flickers and the fog presses against the window, a note of doubt creeps into his writing, a question about the remedy he has trusted for so long. As you imagine this room, let the soft scratch of the quill, the glow of the lamp, and the steady rhythm of the doctor's thoughts lull you, a gentle tide pulling you closer to rest. In the late 18th century, the medical world of Georgian London was rooted in tradition, its practices drawn from centuries of wisdom and the pages of Latin texts. Laudanum, a tincture of opium and alcohol, was a cornerstone, prescribed for everything from fevers to melancholy, its effects immediate and undeniable. A few drops could calm a racing heart, ease a persistent pain, or bring sleep to a restless mind. The doctor's study, with its air of authority and its shelves of trusted remedies, was a place where patients like Eliza Carter sought answers, their faith in the physician absolute. Yet by 1795, some doctors began to notice patterns that troubled them, patients who returned, their symptoms worse despite the drug, their faces paler, their hands unsteady. These observations were recorded in journals, their pages filled with careful script and Latin terms. A physician might note a patient's debility or nervous exhaustion, puzzled by their decline despite the laudanum they took. A woman like Eliza, visiting with trembling hands and a voice soft with fatigue, might prompt a doctor to question the dose he prescribed, though answers were elusive. The concept of addiction was unknown, the term not yet coined, but the signs were their patients needing larger doses, their health fading, their lives narrowing to the rhythm of the bottle. Some doctors began to experiment, suggesting herbal teas or rest instead of laudanum. But these alternatives lacked the drug's power, and patients resisted, their bodies craving the familiar bitterness. Medical texts of the time, their pages heavy with ink and authority, started to hint at these concerns. A few physicians wrote of excessive use leading to weakness of the constitution. Their words cautious but significant. These writings, shared among colleagues in coffee houses or learned societies, were the seeds of change, though they grew slowly in a field dominated by tradition. The air in the doctor's study carried the scent of laudanum, mingling with the smells of parchment and wax, a reminder of its constant presence. Yet the flicker of doubt, like the candle on the desk, was a sign that the medical world was beginning to turn, its trust in the bottle wavering. As you imagine this scene, let the glow of the lamp, the rustle of pages, and the doctor's quiet musings guide you, a soothing rhythm carrying you towards sleep. The apothecaries' experiments, seeking a new path now. Picture yourself in an apothecary's shop, its wooden door creaking softly as it opens, releasing a wave of scents that envelop you: dried lavender, crushed rosemary, the sharp bite of alcohol, and the faint sweetness of honey. The room is small, its shelves crowded with jars, bottles, and bundles of herbs tied with twine. The apothecary, his apron stained with years of mixing remedies, stands behind a counter, his hands moving with practiced ease as he measures ingredients into a mortar. A bottle of laudanum sits among the others, its dark glass catching the light of an oil lamp, but beside it are new jars: chamomile, valerian, hops, signs of a quiet shift in his craft. As you settle into this scene, let the soft clatter of bottles, the rustle of paper, and the apothecary's steady movements lull you, a gentle tide pulling you closer to rest. Apothecaries were the heartbeat of Georgian London's medical world, their shops a haven for those seeking relief. Laudanum was their most trusted remedy, sold without question to anyone with coins: a mother like Eliza Carter, a laborer with aching joints, a child sent with a few pennies. The air in the shop carried the acrid scent of opium, mingling with the smells of herbs and wax, a comforting blend that promised solace. Yet, by the late 18th century, some apothecaries began to see troubling patterns in their ledgers, the same names returning week after week, their purchases growing larger, their faces paler. Eliza's name, recorded in neat script, appeared more frequently, her bottles emptying faster, her hands trembling as she paid. These observations prompted cautious experiments. An apothecary might dilute laudanum with water or mix it with herbs like chamomile or lavender, hoping to lessen its hold. He might offer a tea of valerian root to calm nerves, its earthy scent a stark contrast to the drug's bitterness. In the back room, where a small fire burned, he tested new blends, the air thick with the steam of boiling herbs and the faint haze of opium. His ledger, its pages yellowed and curling, recorded these efforts alongside sales, a silent testament to his growing unease. Yet customers resisted change, their bodies accustomed to laudanum's power, their minds unwilling to trust a gentler remedy. The apothecary's shop remained a place of trust, its shelves a mosaic of bottles that gleamed in the lamplight. But the experiments were a flicker of hope, a sign that the tide was turning. For families like these new remedies were a distant promise. Thomas, desperate to help his wife, might visit the apothecary, asking for something to ease her reliance. The apothecary might hand him a small jar of chamomile tea, its scent warm and soothing, but Eliza's tremors returned when she tried it, her body demanding the bottle's bitter relief. The shop, with its glow spilling onto the street, was a beacon of both tradition and change, its air carrying the sense of hope and habit. As you imagine this scene, let the soft clink of glass, the rustle of herbs, and the apothecary's steady voice guide you, a soothing rhythm carrying you toward sleep, the household's endurance. Eliza's ongoing struggle returned now to Eliza Carter's home, a small room above a baker's shop, where the air carries the warmth of fresh bread and the faint bitterness of laudanum. The year is 1795, and Eliza, now in her late 20s, sits by a low hearth, its fire casting shadows on walls patched with damp. Her hands tremble as she reaches for the bottle, its glass worn smooth by years of use. The liquid, sharp and bitter, steadies her for another day, but its relief is fleeting, demanding more with each dose. Her husband, Thomas, watches with quiet worry, his ledger smudged with the weight of their dwindling coins. Their daughter, Mary, plays silently in a corner, her rag doll a constant companion in a home shaped by the bottle's rhythm. As you settle into this scene, let the soft creak of the floorboards, the flicker of the candle, and the hush of a family's endurance lull you, a gentle tide pulling you closer to rest. Eliza's dependence has grown over the years, its roots tracing back to a doctor's prescription for a fever that lingered too long. The bottle was once a quiet friend, bringing rest to her nights and calm to her mornings. But now it is her master, dictating her every hour. Her body bears the toll, her skin pale, her cheeks hollow, her hands unsteady without the drug. Her mind, once sharp with the tasks of a shopkeeper's daughter, drifts like the fog outside, her thoughts consumed by the need for another dose. The home, once tidy, is cluttered with unwashed dishes and unmended clothes, the air heavy with the scent of laudanum, bread, and damp. Thomas works longer hours, his shoulders stooped under the weight of debt and worry, while Mary, now 3, moves through the world with a quiet caution, her silence a mirror of her mother's stillness. Yet the family endures, their love a fragile light in the drug's shadow. Thomas tries to help, bringing home herbal teas or urging Eliza to see another doctor, but her body resists, craving the bottle's bitter relief. In quiet moments, Eliza feels a flicker of resolve, stirred by Mary's small hand in hers or Thomas's gentle presence by the hearth. She might try to skip a dose, diluting it with water, but the tremors return, her resolve crumbling under the weight of need. The family's struggle is not loud but quiet, a daily battle fought in the small acts of Thomas's steady hand, Mary's soft questions, Eliza's fleeting smiles. The air in their home carries the warmth of these moments, mingling with the bitterness of laudanum, a reminder of their resilience in the face of loss. Neighbors, passing by the open window, see Eliza's pale face and smell the drug's faint scent, but they do not judge. Their own homes hold similar bottles, their lives touched by the same quiet dependence. A friend might visit, sharing a sip from her own vial, their conversation a gentle exchange of remedies and reassurances. The community's endurance is a shared one, its members bound by love and struggle, their lives woven together by the drug's pervasive presence. As you imagine this home, let the glow of the fire, the clink of a spoon, and the hush of a family's love guide you, a soothing rhythm carrying you toward sleep. The enduring legacy, a city in transition as the 18th century drew to a close. London stood at a turning point, its trust in laudanum beginning to waver. Though the bottle remained a constant in homes and shops, the whispers of concernry recorded in doctors' journals, hinted at in apothecaries' ledgers, felt in families like Eliza's were the first ripples of change, a tide that would grow stronger in the decades to come. Medical texts began to call for caution, their pages urging restraint in the use of opium. Apothecaries tested new remedies, their shelves filling with jars of herbs that promised a gentler relief. Families, though bound by dependence, found moments of resilience, their love a light that flickered through the drug's shadow. The legacy of laudanum was one of both loss and endurance, a reflection of a city that trusted a remedy without seeing its cost. For people like Eliza, the drug stole strength and clarity, but it could not erase the bonds of family or the hope that sustained them. Across London, countless others lived similar stories, their lives reshaped by the bottle, yet marked by quiet acts of courage. Mothers who sang to their children, workers who rose despite their weakness, communities that held together in the face of struggle. The city's streets, filled with the clatter of hooves and the hum of voices, carried these stories, their rhythm unbroken, even as the tide began to turn. As you imagine this world, let the images soften the glow of a lantern, the rustle of a page, the faint scent of laudanum lingering in the air. The legacy of laudanum was a complex one, woven from trust and betrayal, struggle and resilience. For now, rest in these images, the rhythm of history, a gentle lullaby carrying you closer to the edge of sleep. A modest room above a baker's shop, where the air carries the warmth of fresh bread. The year is 1795, and Eliza, now in her late 20s, sits by a low hearth, its fire casting shadows on walls patched with damp. Her hands tremble as she reaches for the bottle, its glass worn smooth by years of use. The liquid, sharp and bitter, steadies her for another day, but its relief is fleeting, demanding more with each dose. Her husband, Thomas, watches with quiet worry, his ledger smudged with the weight of their dwindling coins. Their daughter, Mary, plays silently in a corner, her rag doll a constant companion in a home shaped by the bottle's rhythm. As you settle into this scene, let the soft creak of the floorboards, the flicker of the candle, and the hush of a family's endurance lull you. A gentle tide pulling you closer to rest. Eliza's dependence has grown over the years, its roots tracing back to a doctor's prescription for a fever that lingered too long. The bottle was once a quiet friend, bringing rest to her nights and calm to her mornings. But now it is her captor, dictating her every hour. Her body bears the toll, her skin pale, her cheeks hollow, her hands unsteady without the drug. Her mind, once sharp with the tasks of a shopkeeper's daughter, drifts like the fog outside, her thoughts consumed by the need for another dose. The home, once tidy, is cluttered with unwashed dishes and unmended clothes, the air heavy with the scent of laudanum, bread, and damp. Thomas works longer hours, his shoulders stooped under the weight of debt and worry, while Mary, now 3, moves through the world with a quiet caution. Her silence, a mirror of her mother's stillness, yet the family's resilience shines through. A fragile light in the drug's shadow. Thomas tries to help, bringing home herbal teas or urging Eliza to see another doctor, his voice gentle but firm. In quiet moments, Eliza feels a flicker of hope, stirred by Mary's small hand in hers or Thomas's steady presence by the hearth. She might try to skip a dose, diluting it with water, but the tremors return, her resolve crumbling under the weight of need. The family's struggle is not loud, but quiet, a daily battle fought in small acts of Thomas's steady hand, Mary's soft questions, Eliza's fleeting smiles. The air in their home carries the warmth of these moments, mingling with the bitterness of laudanum, a reminder of their endurance in the face of loss. Neighbors, passing by the open window, see Eliza's pale face and smell the drug's faint scent, but they do not judge. Their own homes hold similar bottles, their lives touched by the same quiet dependence. A friend might visit, sharing a sip from her own vial, their conversation a gentle exchange of remedies and reassurances. The community's resilience is a shared one, its members bound by love and struggle, their lives woven together by the drug's pervasive presence. As you imagine this home, let the glow of the fire, the clink of a spoon, and the hush of a family's love guide you, a soothing rhythm carrying you toward sleep. The lasting imprint, a world in transitionness. The Georgian era faded into the early 19th century. Laudanum's legacy lingered, its echoes felt in the homes, shops, and studies of London. The drug remained a staple, its bottles lining shelves in every corner of the city. But the tide was turning. Doctors, their journals filled with cautious words, began to advocate for reform, their voices a faint chorus in a world of tradition. Apothecaries, their shelves stocked with new remedies, navigated a path between habit and innovation, their experiments a sign of hope. Families like Eliza, though bound by dependence, found ways to endure, their love a light that flickered through the drug's shadow. The imprint of laudanum was one of both loss and resilience, a reflection of a society that trusted a remedy without seeing its cost. For people like Eliza, the drug stole strength and clarity, but it could not erase the bonds of family or the hope that sustained them. Across London, countless others lived similar stories, their lives reshaped by the bottle, yet marked by quiet acts of courage. Mothers who sang to their children, workers who rose despite their weakness, communities that held together in the face of struggle. The city's streets, filled with the clatter of hooves and the hum of voices, carried these stories, their rhythm a testament to a world in transition. As you imagine this world, let the images soften the glow of a lantern, the rustle of a page, the faint scent of laudanum lingering in the air. The legacy of laudanum was a complex one, woven from trust and betrayal, struggle and endurance. For now, Rest in these images, the rhythm of history, a gentle lullaby, carrying you closer to the edge of sleep.